But I think the biggest story in Georgia football right now, it's the health of Carson Beck. I think that's what everyone wants to know. It's no one really has any concrete information here. We've heard it's a UCL injury. Like that could mean he's back in 2 or 3 weeks. That could mean he's out for like 6-7 months. Like we don't know the severity of it to this point. I tend to lean towards Carson Beck. We've seen the last of Carson Beck in a Georgia Bulldogs uniform, and that's just a real bummer for me personally. I think I wouldn't call myself a Carson Beck apologist by any means. I will gladly admit that the guy was playing some of his worst football of his career against Alabama, against Florida, against. I don't put the Ole Miss game on Carson Beck because I think it was just an offensive line that was getting dominated, and there was nothing that guy could really do. But I look at I'm fully aware of Carson Beck's struggles throughout the season, but he had clearly righted the ship, and you saw Georgia, he had, what was it, 11, 12 interceptions, like a 4-game span. Since then, he had thrown 11 touchdowns and no interceptions. And so Carson Beck had really started to figure things out. I can't stress enough that this team leads the nation in drops. They lead the nation in drops, and they were second to last in the SEC in rushing offense. And yet they were in the SEC championship and won the damn thing. I guess, give Carson Beck as however much credit you want for winning it. They were down 6-3 at the half when he left the game. But Georgia had been a second half team all season long. Like personally, when I saw Georgia going into the half down 6-3 with, I can't remember the exact stats. I think Texas led like 270 to like 70 in the total yards. It was something out insane, and yet Georgia was still sitting at just a 6-3 deficit. So when I saw that, I definitely thought with what Georgia had been in the second half, like Georgia's going to come out and take care of this game and right it in the second half. That's what they've done all season. Unfortunately, Carson Beck gets hurt on that Hail Mary at halftime, and he never got the opportunity to right the ship. So Gunnar Stockton comes in, and it couldn't have been better timing for Georgia. If you're going to have your starting quarterback get hurt, I highly recommend it be on the final play of the first half. Like the fact that you go all the way into halftime and you could just design a game plan around Gunnar Stockton, around his strengths, around his weaknesses, and find a way to win that game. It was one of the more impressive coaching performances, I think, of Kirby Smart's entire career. Kirby Smart is constantly labeled as this guy who's, all he does is recruit. And yeah, who couldn't win if you have that many 5 stars all over the field? And I think you've seen this Georgia team this year. Like, we know that there's a lot of 5 stars. There's plenty of highly ranked recruits. But when I'm watching Georgia play this year, especially on the offensive side of the ball, it doesn't look like Georgia has superior talent to everyone they're playing. Like this has not been the most talented Georgia team we've seen under Kirby Smart. And especially when your quarterback goes down at halftime and all you do in 6 drives with Gunnar Stockton is you score 4 times and find a way to win the SEC championship. Like it was a very impressive performance. You can't say enough about the fake punt. I mean, it was literally the black mark on Kirby Smart's coaching legacy to this point, was that fake punt in the 2018 SEC championship with Justin Fields against Alabama that eventually Alabama scored, and with Jalen Hurts coming in for Tua in that one and won the game and won the SEC. Like that was one of the bigger black marks, like I said, on Kirby Smart's entire resume, the entire 9 years he'd been a head coach. So for him in a 13-13 game with like 12 minutes left on your own 30-yard line to call that fake punt, and what a call too. I think I've ever seen the little shovel pass from the center from Drew Bobo getting it done. Arian Smith getting it done. Also, Arian Smith, for as much grief as Arian Smith gets about catching passes or about dropping passes, doesn't get any grief about catching passes, but the dropping passes, that's been an issue. This guy has recovered some fumbles now. It is Georgia fumbled 4 times in this game, and I believe got all of them back against Texas. Arian Smith recovers the clutch one near the end zone. But also I saw someone on Twitter earlier this week showed the Arian Smith, the Oscar Delp fumble in late against Kentucky when Georgia's up 13-12 with like 2 minutes left, and Arian Smith dives in there and recovers that fumble. So say what you want about this guy dropping passes. It's been frustrating at times. Another couple drops against Texas in this one. But man, he's had some clutch fumble recoveries and this clutch first down run on the fake punt. So I felt like this was one of Kirby Smart's best coaching performances. And I was glad to see Kirby. I think he's a semifinalist or a finalist. There's like 5 or 6 finalists for National Coach of the Year. Because I really do think with this schedule and the adversity this team has had, I think this has been one of Kirby Smart's best coaching jobs of his career. So with that said, going back to Gunnar Stockton, I personally am operating, on as if Carson Beck is out for the season. And so 15, Carson Beck, I salute you, sir, to your 2 years as a starter at Georgia. It was a great 2 years. I think Carson Beck is one of the better quarterbacks to come out of Georgia in the last several years. But and maybe the highest drafted. I could definitely see him, even though he has had his struggles in 2024. And this injury is obviously gonna throw a variable into that for sure. But Carson Beck is a super talented quarterback, and you saw him use his legs as the season went on, and kind of the team needed him to kind of do some things that he's not usually accustomed to doing. I think a lot is made about all the off-field stuff with Carson Beck, and I think it's all garbage, to be honest. I think this dude, yeah, he's making money. Yeah, he's got a hot, famous girlfriend. Yeah, he drives a Lambo. I wouldn't drive a Lambo personally if I had all that money, but, different strokes for different folks. Carson Beck's a dude, and it's a shame that Georgia likely will not be able to go through this college football playoff run with their starting quarterback, because I think that was one of my bigger arguments the whole season was, yeah, Carson Beck had been disappointing, but it was also, look who's out there. This was one of my biggest points. Like I said, the whole season, especially once this playoff picture started to get cleared up, who's got the quarterback advantage over Georgia that's in this 12-team field if it's Carson Beck? Like Dillon Gabriel, without a doubt. I'll give you Dillon Gabriel. Like he's going to be a Heisman finalist, but Dillon Gabriel's not Shedeur Sanders. He's not Cam Ward. Like those are the difference makers that truly elevate a team. You don't see a lot of those guys in this field. Sam Leavitt from Arizona State. Guys had a great season. Will Howard, really good quarterback. Nico, talented guy. None of those guys have produced better than Carson Beck this year. I mean, or at least arguably. Quinn Ewers, yeah, he's arguably been better than Carson Beck, but Georgia's won 2 games against Quinn Ewers. Like Georgia also beat why am I blanking on Cade Klubnik's name? On Cade Klubnik. Like there's just not a lot of great quarterbacks. Drew Allard, like who's the guy that necessarily scares you? Curtis Rourke. Like I think in this field there's not a lot of elite quarterbacks, and so I think that really was an equalizer that Georgia was not going to have a disadvantage at quarterback regardless of who they played. Now with Gunnar Stockton, now things are different. Now this is just a wild card. Like people are going to definitely throw out Stetson Bennett comparisons with Gunnar, and I get it. He's got the athletic ability. This guy was supposed to be a dual threat coming out of high school. And I don't know if you guys remember when Gunnar Stockton was playing Prince Avenue Christian, when Brock Vandegrift, he was a junior in high school, Brock Vandegrift was a senior, and it was like an ESPN nationally televised game, Rabun County versus Prince Avenue Christian. And Gunnar Stockton, this guy's got some swagger about him. Like he's got some piss and vinegar. It's like he I don't know if you noticed that first down run he had on the sideline in the Texas game. Like he was up chirping in the defensive back's face. Like this guy, he does not shy away from contact. Maybe he will need to a little bit with him being the only like quote unquote inexperienced guy, because he doesn't have any experience. He didn't have any true game experience until that Texas game. But and for what it's worth, I thought Jaden Rashada would be the third string guy. But according to Rusty Mansell after the game, I guess Ryan Puglisi was the one that was actually the true freshman. He was going to be the one that was taking snaps, that was ready to go in after Stockton got hurt. but until Carson Beck said he could take the snap. So Puglisi is actually the third stringer. So a lot of inexperience in that quarterback room left for Georgia. Obviously, Rashada does have his experience at Arizona State, but also on top of the making the case for Gunnar Stockton, that hit he took, man, to hold on to the football. Not only did he hold on to the football, but he also popped right up. Like, no judgment. Like, I wasn't going to judge you, Gunnar, if you laid there for 5 minutes. Like, dude got absolutely rocked, but that's the kind of player he is, and I think there's something to be said for that. Like, I think Georgia fans specifically kind of probably have this mindset of, Matthew Stafford's the best quarterback that ever came through Georgia. He was the pro prospect. He had the $1 million arm or the $50 million arm, whatever he got paid right out of the draft. Like, dude is physically gifted, and he had the NFL talent, could make all the throws, all that prototype size, but Georgia didn't have all the success. And I'm a Stafford guy through and through, so I won't take any slander of Stafford either while people are at it. But there's a certain portion of the Georgia fan base that just never loved Stafford. He was the pro prospect, but he wasn't the great college player. And I think that's a fair critique in terms of not necessarily having the college production. I think he threw double-digit interceptions all 3 years he was at Georgia, even though he threw a bunch of touchdowns his sophomore and junior year. But when it comes to having success in college, we've seen plenty of guys have success in college that aren't NFL quarterbacks. And those guys tend to be the guys that are able to use their legs. And that's the kind of guy that Gunnar Stockton is. So when you see all of a sudden, I don't think it's a coincidence that all of a sudden Gunnar Stockton comes in the game, and now Trevor Etienne goes for 90-something yards, and Nate Frazier had 50-something yards. I think the two of them average about 7 yards a carry. I don't think it's a coincidence. And granted, the probably Georgia's best running performance of the season was the first round, the first meeting of Georgia and Texas, when Carson Beck was still the starter and threw 3 interceptions. But in this one, it's like Georgia just had to kind of change their identity a little bit, and they had to just find ways to win. Like, I find so many people like already jumping a step. It's like there's 2 steps to this. There's one step, that's the step we're on, which is what a gritty performance by Gunnar Stockton, and the backup quarterback comes in, wins the game, yada yada yada. Like, Georgia finds a way to win. What an incredible SEC champions. What an incredible feeling. The next step is, okay, can Georgia win anything with Gunnar Stockton? We're not at that step yet, folks. Don't let people rush you to that second step. You don't have to get to that step yet. Right now, I think it's just so impressive what Georgia did with Gunnar Stockton and finding ways to move the ball and changing their identity, because this is what I've said about Georgia all year. There's a lot of teams, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record. Everyone loves to say we've yet to play our complete game. And there's a lot of teams out there, because you're not a complete team. There's a lot of teams that don't play complete. When there's a lot of incomplete teams that don't play complete games. Georgia's one of those few teams that's not played a complete game, but has shown signs of being elite at times on offense and elite at times on defense. And as bad as the running game has been, would it shock anybody if all of a sudden, with their pedigree at running back and their pedigree on the offensive line, if all of a sudden this Georgia team found a way to run the ball offensively? Like, I don't think it would shock. I think we're all really surprised through 13 games that Georgia's run game has been as bad as it is. So I don't think it's a surprise that Gunnar Stockton comes in. You have the threat of the quarterback keeping it and using his legs. All of a sudden, that creates a little different running room for the running backs. And you saw what Etienne was able to do, and you saw what Nate Frazier was able to do. And man, Etienne, is it any question, folks? My favorite Gator of all time. This guy, I was skeptical. We got a Gator, then he gets suspended. Like, what are we doing here, people? But man, this guy, with hearing some of the quotes he had in the SEC championship and talking about, man, this is the reason he came to Georgia, was to play in games like this. Like, oh, you got to get excited for a guy like Trevor Etienne and what he's been able to do for this team. and what he was able to do for the 2 times against Texas. I should say what Trevor Etienne, Peyton Woodring, and Dalen Everett were all able to do in their 2 games against Texas. Like those guys just absolutely dominated the Texas Longhorns. Peyton Woodring being the kicker, of course, and Trevor Etienne scored every single point in the 2 games against Texas. And then Dalen Everett with 3 interceptions and a sack and a forced fumble in his 2 games against Texas. Like probably Dalen Everett's 2 best games the entire year came against the Longhorns. So let's see. We got let me catch up to the group chat here. Jackson Johnson chiming in here. Gunnar Stockton replacing Carson Beck will be similar to Tua replacing Jalen Hurts. I don't know about all that, sir. I like Gunnar Stockton as much as the next guy. I kind of compared him to like a Connor Shaw or someone coming out. Part of that could have been me being skewed by him being committed to South Carolina there for at least I guess a sophomore and junior, I think. But the Raven County guy, he's always a Georgia guy through and through. And he ended up back in Athens. But I don't know. I tend to think Carson Beck is better than Gunnar Stockton. What it could be on a smaller scale, I could see it being more like Stetson Bennett for JT Daniels. Like JT Daniels, people kind of forget was really good in his time at Georgia. Like he only had, I think, the 3 or 4 starts to end 2020, and he threw like, I want to say like 10, 12 touchdowns, multiple 300-yard games. You saw Pickens like finally putting up some numbers. And he had those quotes about, if you're not gonna, I don't know why you recruit these big time receivers if you're not gonna use them. And then he had Georgia obviously didn't score an offensive touchdown or an offensive point. No, they scored 10 points. They didn't score an offensive touchdown in that opener versus Clemson in 2021, but the offense was moving, like was clicking against South Carolina and Vandy early in the season. I think they were up 28-0 in the first quarter against Vandy. And that South Carolina game in 2021 was the one where JT Daniels throws the touchdown to AD Mitchell. Then I think he high fives Arch Manning in the front row. It's a big recruiting weekend and everything. Like the offense was moving the ball vertically, and JT Daniels like was kind of showing that he was that quarterback with the big arm, the 5-star billing, like he was what he was supposed to be. So he never really fell off at Georgia. It was just like it was whatever oblique. It was like he'd be day to day every single week. And I think the coaches just kind of got tired of it. They're like, the best of ability is availability, right? And Stetson got that start against UAB through like 5 touchdowns. And then he got the start against Arkansas, and Georgia won like 31-0. And I think it was Nolan Smith. Yeah, Nolan Smith was the one. It was like after the Florida game where just completely unprovoked was like, look, Stetson's the guy. We can start talking about JT, whatever. Like, we're in it. Stetson's our guy. We're all in. That's similar to the vibe that I got with celebrating that SEC championship among the players. Like, people have seen that moment that's gone like kind of viral with Trevor Etienne and Gunnar Stockton kind of dapping each other up. The first play of the second half, you could almost see you can almost hear Etienne being like, "Let's go, baby! Like this is your time now. Like, let's do this thing." Like, that was just kind of a cool moment. So I think there's something to Gunnar Stockton being this guy who's got the dual threat ability. Like, I think those guys in general just kind of gain respect of the team because they're physical. They're more football players than the guy who's sitting back in the pocket, throwing 50-yard bombs. Even if he does have a great arm, you kind of see, that respect with the quarterback that's in the trenches with you. And Gunnar Stockton's been that guy that in the spring game, like he doesn't have the non-contact jersey on, so he's trying to lower his head and get those tough yards. And I think a football team just tends to respect a guy like that. So hey, if you're right, Jackson, and Gunnar becomes Tua to Jalen Hurts, I'm here for it. But I wouldn't be surprised if he was. I should say, I shouldn't say I wouldn't be surprised if he's Stetson. If he's Stetson, then that's an absolute home run. So maybe he's Cardell Jones, and we can just get like 3 good games out of him, like Ohio State did back in 2014 when they won the national title with their 3rd-string quarterback. But yeah, I like your confidence. So let's keep it moving. So yeah, like I said, Gunnar Stockton time. It remains to be seen. I'm not one of these that's like good riddance to Carson Beck. Will be better without you. The offense did move the ball better without with when Gunnar Stockton came into the game on Saturday. But I tend to think there's this thing people talk about, the Patrick Ewing effect, and it just kind of applies to star players. There's something about teams that they just kind of rally. They kind of rally around. They everyone knows they need to do a little bit more without the star player, and then the sum. What is the expression? The the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. Like, I guess there are those Braves fans out there that think Acuna is a showboat or something, and the Braves were better without him. I tend to think it's an anomaly that the Braves won a World Series without Ronald Acuna, but I think there's something too, like, everyone knows they got to do a little bit more to win it all, and that Braves team, man, they just if you're going to get Jorge Soler and Adam Duvall and Eddie Rosario and guys hitting like that, then yeah, you can win a World Series. But give me Acuna 9 times or 10 times out of 10 because he's a better player. And I don't know how I got off on the Acuna thing, but that's what I'm saying. There's a chance everyone knows that they just have to do a little bit more with Carson Beck out of the game. Georgia maybe designed a little more simple game plan, and there's also a chance that Carson Beck, or excuse me, I keep going back on their names. I hope I'm not confusing people. There's a chance that Gunnar Stockton, he does kind of fit the identity of this team better. Like, this team still doesn't have an identity, as crazy as it is through 13 games, because you see the two performances versus Texas, and definitely I think the second half versus Tennessee, there's been several times where the defense has looked elite. There's also been a lot of other times this defense has not been elite. The Georgia Tech game comes to mind. Like, that was 2 weeks ago, right? Our feelings have changed a lot in the last 2 weeks. But the Georgia Tech did whatever they wanted on the ground, like just had this quarterback going nuts. Like, it was kind of insane to see the amount of success that Georgia Tech was having, and then for Georgia to follow it up with Texas and give up one offensive touchdown the entire day, if two touchdowns, I think, in this one. I'll have to look that up. I'm blanking off the top of my head. Maybe they only gave up the one touchdown because they scored 16 points in regulation and then the field goal. So I think they did just score the one offensive touchdown. So if this defense can play like they played against Texas, specifically the defensive line, like I thought this was Mykel Williams' maybe strongest performance of the season. Warren Brinson was just living in the backfield in this one. Xavier McLeod looked really good, made a couple plays early in this game. Like, you just saw the defensive line kind of wreaking havoc like they haven't at times. You saw Chaz Chambliss get into the passer. You saw Damon Wilson has really emerged as a good pass rusher as the season has gone along. Like, and Jalen Walker, we obviously know, I think he's the most talented player on this Georgia defense personally. Like, this defense, if they can play the way they played on Saturday, then yeah, if this team becomes a run team and can just kind of shorten the game, like, I think if there's any team has to change the style of team they were through the first 13 games for the college football playoff, I think you'd like Georgia's chances to be one of those teams. So it remains to be seen, but I think there's still reason for optimism that Georgia can find a way to make a run in this college football playoff.